Awesome, Steve. Thank you. And you have obviously a long history working for the Polk County Attorney's Office, the State Attorney General, being an Assistant Attorney General. So, kind of want to just hear your perspective on the arrest that was just made in the cold case for Ashley Okland. Walk me through just kind of what is going through a prosecuting attorney's, mind when the initial arrest is made.
Yeah, there was obviously a lot of things going on in the background prior to making the arrest. It sounds like they convened a grand jury, which would have allowed them to bring in witnesses and place them under oath in front of the grand jurors. That's one of the investigative tools that the prosecutors have. Obviously, those proceedings are all very secret until an arrest is made. And then, obviously, uh, all the discovery and everything else will be provided to the defense lawyers and the defendant. But as a prosecutor, they're obviously been working on this case for a while and developed some leads that were enable them to at least go down a path that led to making an arrest.
And how do they kind of build up all this evidence and remain confident in bringing these type of charges on a suspect? I mean, first degree murder, the highest that you can get in this case. So how do they kind of feel confident in that charge?
Well, they have got to look at all the evidence, obviously, the forensic evidence, the witness statements, any photographs, video that they may have developed over the course of the years. And then what they realize, obviously, is that they've got to prove each element of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. So they know that going in. And so if they weren't confident that they had evidence or witness statements to reach that burden of proof, then they probably would have declined any charges.
Kind of want to hear your perspective on cold cases specifically. I saw that you were featured on A&E's cold case files series, and kind of want to hear just from your perspective, what exactly, just how difficult are cold cases for the prosecuting attorneys, especially one that has almost been 15 years cold?
Yeah, they are very difficult because a lot of the memories have lapsed, although you will have had hopefully witness statements taken by law enforcement, back when all this happened that they'll be able to use, and they'll be able to use those statements to refresh the memory of the particular witness. I'm sure they would have kept all the physical evidence from the scene, the photographs, the video, anything they had from that time frame. So the investigators would have been able to go over that again, and the prosecutors now would have obviously been able to go over all that evidence, physical evidence, again, and determine how it fits together with the witness statements that I'm sure they would have went back and redone or taken probably some witness statements new. But it's always hard to go back, a number of years and try to piece together what happened 15 years ago.
And that was going to kind of lead into my next question is how do you build a strong and confident case when it's something that happened so long ago, memories have faded, and just how do you build the case around that?
Yeah, again, it's a lot of hard work, a lot of going through all the prior police reports, any potential leads that they had, and I'm sure they did a great job going through all of that. Matt Schultz, the Dallas County Attorney, and Scott Brown from the Attorney General's Office Cold Case Unit, I'm sure they worked really hard behind the scenes to try and develop every lead that they had 15 years ago, and then expand on that. And like you said, probably put some witnesses under oath in front of the grand jury, and they were able to develop some additional witness statements as a result of that.
Do you think that, and I guess just in your experience in cold cases, when it comes to gathering the evidence and still working to find, a suspect and bring on these charges, is this, around the clock thing every week? There's constantly information that prosecutors and investigators are digging into, or do you think maybe if it's not necessarily specifically in this case, or is there a consistent time where maybe there's a break in the case and then that's when things are reopened, or is this a constant cycle of looking for new witnesses, looking for new tips and evidence, etc., or do you think in this case it was maybe just a break that led to something?
It's really hard to tell, and obviously I don't know any of the details in this case and the recent investigation. Um, what's been somewhat of a new development was the cold case unit at the Attorney General's office to actually go back and look at cold cases and hopefully develop new leads from those. Now, it could have been a new lead or a break in the case that focused their attention on this particular case. Or the other option would be that they just were interested in this case for some reason. It came to their attention, and then so they dug into it and were able to develop some additional leads that obviously brought them to an arrest.
When you see, just based off your experience, when you see an arrest made and charges brought in an almost 15-year cold case, what's your initial reaction?
Um, I think, obviously, I've got confidence in the law enforcement and the prosecutors in this case. And so I think they are experienced and know what they're doing. And so it's, I think, really good to be able to bring closure to the family. That obviously it's very hard on a victim's family to process everything and to leave a lot of unanswered questions. And this case obviously had a lot of unanswered questions in it. So I think it's gratifying in that sense, is that hopefully that the family can get some answers and get some closure.
Do you expect more cold cases having these types of breakthroughs, specifically with, modern technology, more forensic science, just the advancement of all of these tools and resources that investigators do have?
Yeah, obviously the more tools that law enforcement has, the better off they are, and the more accurate the investigations can become. So yeah, all of that helps immensely in terms of trying to figure out exactly what happened. And as we talked earlier, a lot of that is really difficult when you're talking about an event that occurred 15 years ago or 20 years ago. There's no statute of limitations for murder, so they can go back as long as they've got evidence to try and produce and examine.
And just when you go through these cases, obviously it takes, a long time for prosecuting attorneys to, and a lot of work to put together all the evidence and bring it to light. So, how do you envision prosecuting attorneys just to go about structuring this case and the workload that's going to go into it, and just how they build up that case if it does go to trial?
They'll approach the case pretty much like they would any murder case or any high profile case. There are certain steps along the judicial process that occur, obviously. The harder part is kind of refreshing the recollection of any of the witnesses in the case because it is so long. So hopefully they've got witness statements from, years ago that they can rely on, and the witnesses can review those in order to kind of refresh their memories. And I'm sure they probably would have taken interviews that they can go back and listen to back then when the crime originally happened.
And can you walk me through a little bit more? Sorry, I'm kind of backtracking here, but I want to walk through a little bit more about the grand jury indictment and just the process that it takes to get to one of those. You said they have to bring together a jury. Tell me about how long that process is and what it looks like.
Grand jury in Iowa is a little bit different than the federal system. I'm sure in this case, the prosecutors used the grand jury kind of as an investigative tool to bring witnesses in front of the grand jury and have them testify under oath. The grand jurors would then have to make a determination as to whether or not the case should proceed. And I'm sure that input is valuable to the prosecutors as well.
And I mean, just for cold cases in general going forward, is there a little bit more emotional weight that comes with cold cases, not only for, the victims' families and loved ones, but also the prosecution that's trying to, push this cold case through the end?
Like I said, I'm not sure it's really, as a prosecutor, treated differently than any other high-profile murder case. The time frame takes it a little bit more complicated, obviously, simply because the loss of memory and or evidence may have been, misplaced over the years. Although, in all likelihood, they've kept everything since that happened, and it's been stored probably at the West Des Moines Police Department forever. But it's a little more difficult. But the I think the prosecutors approach it the same way they would any murder case.
Absolutely. Is there anything I'm not asking you about that you wanted to share or, maybe offer perspective on when it comes to prosecuting cold cases?
I think you covered a lot of it, which is
Great.
good.
Sorry if I went in circles a little bit there.
No worries at all. Yeah, I'm not sure there's anything else I can add at this point, I guess, without
I
really
guess
knowing much of the facts.
No, totally, totally. And I guess I just thought of another question, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yep.
As someone who has worked for both the Attorney General's office and, Polk County Attorney, how are all of these, because like we said, we see the Dallas County attorneys on this case, but also the Attorney General's office is going to be assisting. So how do they kind of come together in terms of working on this case and prosecuting it?
Yeah, the Attorney General's office always offers help to any local county that requests their help. And they've got a team of experienced prosecutors that will go particularly to the smaller counties that typically don't encounter murder cases or big high profile cases. And so they'll come in and help out with the local prosecutor. And in this particular situation, they had the cold case unit that did a lot of the investigation and ultimately helped resolve or at least get to an arrest this particular murder case. And so it was, I think, obviously they've been involved in the case from the beginning, and I'm sure the Dallas County Attorney, Matt Schultz, has also been involved since the beginning once they started to really focus on a particular individual or a suspect and determine what evidence may be needed in order to make an arrest.
And then one last question about the cold case unit. I know you talked about it a few minutes ago, but I mean, just seeing the cold case unit come to these conclusions, what is your reaction as somebody who used to, work for the Attorney General and just kind of, you teach to students and now about trials? I mean, just how important is this cold case unit now going forward?
Well, I think it's important because obviously you never forget about a murder, and it's always kind of an open case, even though there may not be any active leads or active investigation going until you get that next break. What's nice about the cold case unit is they're actually actively looking at cold cases. So they may not wait for a new lead or something else to happen and bring the case to their attention. They're looking at the case and saying, "Hey, are there avenues that we haven't looked at yet? And are there leads we could follow that we can develop based on what's already been done?" And so it's taking a little bit of a different angle toward the investigations. And obviously, um, anytime you can go back a certain number of years, 15 years in this case, and develop a lead and develop a suspect and be able to hopefully bring this case to a conclusion, that's a really good thing.
Absolutely. Well, very good information, Steve. I don't think I have any other questions for you, so I do really appreciate your time to chat about this. It's a good perspective.